Blasting, and we're live. Hey, folks, this is Walt for the Bamf podcast, and our pick of the week. I really wish I should have some sound effects queued up. Today we have frequent collaborators, Alice and Brandon. How are you guys?
Great. How are you?
Doing wonderful.
Trying to stay out of trouble and, sucking down allergy meds as fast as I can get them in because it's that time of year. But today, other than my love of Zyrtec, we're going to go into our love of what we have consumed during the week. Brandon, did you want to start us off?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to give a shout out to Peter Mayhew and his family. Chewbacca was, my favorite character in Star Wars growing up and to this day. I love that, strong, I wouldn't say silent type with Chewie, but, the person who can't really communicate that well with the rest of the group. And, it's very sad that he's passed. And just want to take and say that thank you so much, Mr. Mayhew, for the wonderful character that you gave us. And it was a pleasure being able to take the journey. Go give our favorite princess a big hug. So here's one from Dungeon Master to you. For what I was reading, there was a Herblore on the Supers on the Supers board brought attention to something on RPGNet where there was a discussion about the genre mechanics of one versus many, and how some people kind of feel that works, other people feel that doesn't. And in Supers specifically, Supers Revised Edition, that as the more that people attack you, the worse your defenses get effectively. And so to me, like reading through the thread and seeing some of the ideas, I didn't see that much of a difference between that and some of the other games that are out there. Champions and Mutants and Masterminds are some of the big ones for me. In Mutants and Masterminds, as you will attack people, you're going to bruise them, give them a lower and lower ability to resist damage until eventually you KO them. In Champions, if you're just punching for justice as hard as you can, they're going to still keep coming back from each punch, but generally, and this goes to something else I've wanted to talk about a few times, the rock, paper, scissors approach is that, punching for justice as hard as you can is not always the best approach. If you just keep punching Juggernaut, he's just going to keep coming back and not care. And so that you have to have different characters that are kind of acting in different ways. And I just wanted to get thoughts from Walt and Alice real quick on what they thought about the different genre mechanics, how Supers handles that, and in comparison to other games.
Genuinely believe, and I mean, we've played a lot of systems for many, many different genres. It happens in every genre, in almost every system, because you have to wear your opponent down in some fashion. And so whether it's hit points, it's stamina, it's ablative defensive systems, it happens in every genre.
Right on.
So is this a good thing, a bad thing? Are there ways that as a GM that you see that you use to mitigate that kind of approach?
I think in general it's a good thing, but because it depends on the type. In every system, there is a way to work around it to improve your defensive capability against such attacks. In Supers, for example, people might say, well, you're bringing down my stats, but you are able to use each of your powers, and so if you build correctly, you can soak stop a lot of that from happening to you. Similarly to Hero System, you build build armor, build defenses of force fields and such like that. And so I think it's a good thing because different characters will have different weaknesses. Like you said, it's something I wanted to talk about is the rock, paper, scissors, because I see, especially in superhero, brick versus brick. And yes, I know you and other people have talked about, well, especially for people who don't read comic books like us or who don't have the background we do, they come into superhero genre of RPGs from movies and such, or from the Iconics. And who are the Iconics? They're bricks. They're going to be Superman. They're going to be Thor. And so they see brick on brick a lot. But in truth, in RPGs and in the wide scope of superheroes, you have a lot of you have, theoretically 5 major subtypes. Theoretically, there are a couple, there's a little bit of playroom, but each one is, it's a rock paper scissors thing. The brick is going to be weak against the mentalist or the mystic, and but the tank, the brick is going to be really good against certain other types and such like that. So
awesome, thanks much. What about you, Walt?
The thing I like most about games in general is role-playing games in general is that it's really wide open to your imagination. If people just want to slam monster versus monster, or just want to you must immediately go to the Library of Congress website and copyright Punching for Justice, because that's fantastic. If people want to do that, there are plenty of superhero board games and card games that simulate just throwing waves of superhero at waves of supervillain, and then that's it. One of the things that I really enjoy about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the way that its cinematography has affected comics over the last 10 years. Our friend Nick Garber, aside from being a really fun comic artist and a comic book creator, has also been a soldier and is in his day job or night job, depending on where he ends up. He works in federal government, and he understands tactics and response and how to approach an objective, and that comes across in his comic art, and which he doesn't need that prodding because he has that mindset. And it's the same thing in we're seeing that shift in comics. The movies are affecting comic book artists because let's face it, the average comic book artist does not look like Nick Garber, like a big barrel man that just, looks like he can carry 70 pounds of armor and a weapon. And they have limited exposure to the anatomy of a fight. So in comics nowadays, you're seeing stuff like heroes using cover. We see this famously in Age of Ultron when Clint Barton, Hawkeye, is doing his thing right before he talks to Scarlet Witch, and he's using cover. He's going into buildings. He's diving. He's rolling. This is a guy who cannot stand toe to toe with a robot, and he says very famously, "Hey man, I'm fighting robots with a bow and arrow. Things don't get more weird than this." But you don't see him use the bow like a club against these robots. He's using his powers and his abilities and skills in ways that can affect the outcome. And when Aldo Regalado came on the show many years ago and talked up supers and how he was going through the process of creating it, his very famous example is Reed Richards against the Hulk. Reed Richards is not going to stay and just duke it out with the Hulk, because he's going to get smashed. He's going to, the Hulk's going to turn him into a rubber band and fling him across the room. Instead, he waits till the Hulk is all raged up and uses his intellect to get him raged up. And then when the Hulk throws something at him, he uses his intellect once again, or maybe a skill, to calculate that incoming projectile, let it hit something that will either fall or shoot out at the Hulk to slow him down. So yeah, I totally agree with if you're just looking for slam against slam, play a board game. If you're looking to actually outwit, outthink, and outrun your opponent, play a role-playing game, because you're going to have the freedom to make those choices with your character, so that Hawkeye can be the most interesting man in the room, surrounded by Thor and the Hulk and Captain America. So that's where I basically play on that.
I love that response. before you get in, Alice, just something that Walt talked about on Reed Richards versus the Hulk. This reminds me of an old Hulk comic that I got. And Costco used to sell these packs of 20 comic books that were all bound up together. I loved that. Whenever they'd have that, I'd beg my mom for it. And so I got a lot of different Marvel Comics exposure from comics that I wouldn't necessarily be reading on a weekly basis. And one of those was an Incredible Hulk where he goes up against Freedom Force. And so nobody budges the Blob. Okay, well, Hulk literally grabs Blob's fat and starts walking backwards, and it stretches Reed Richards style. And Blob's like, wait, my power doesn't work that way. And then Fred Dukes gets the genius idea, well, if I just lift up, because he can't budge me still, if I lift up, I'm going to smash into this stupid guy so hard. And so that's when Hulk releases. As soon as Blob let go of the ground, he just rubber bands the Blob away. And it's just, I read this 30 years ago, I think, and it's just panels that stick with me because it was so awesome.
Yeah, that's right. That's cool.
So I wanted to just comment on two things Walt said. And one of them was, I totally agree, in the changing landscape of comic books and changing landscape of bringing this to a more diverse group of people. For Brandon and I, for me specifically, I have a background of martial arts, and then when I started gaming with all these military guys, and so very quickly they beat into me. While I was never in the military, they beat into me tactics. So tactics and creative thinking is something that is second nature to me now, thanks to all those amazing military guys. But and so when you're looking at the movies, you can actually really tell, I think, similarly to what you were talking about the tactics, when the actor or actress has martial arts experience or tactical, or tactical background versus when they don't, because it really just shows in the way that they fight, and then it shows in the way that they have to cut the fights. But in response to something that was mentioned at one point by one of the two of you, the bashing, well, both of you actually, the bash versus bash, someone that I know would say, because he actually we were in a conversation similar, and he said, well, look at the Hulkbuster. Hulkbuster is just smash versus smash. And I pointed out to him that the Hulkbuster is a big piece of machine that is meant to deal with Hulk's strength. Yes. However, it is actually tech-based because Stark outsmarted the strength. And it is, oh shoot, I lost part of my train of thought. I apologize. But it is tech-based, and it is designed using a different aspect of superpowers, and it is not meant to go strength on strength in the face-to-face, because it is created to circumvent that.
Well, no,
but
and
it's represented as a fight. It's represented in comics in a different fashion.
In Age of Ultron, where we got that, that's probably the scene that I remember the best from that movie. I haven't seen that movie in years, and keep meaning to watch it again. But that's what I remember the best, is that fight between them. The Hulkbuster armor is losing the fight completely. Yeah. The only reason is because it's got regen, where he's calling in replacement parts. But Hulk is literally ripping the machine apart repeatedly, and the only reason that it keeps going is because Tony is able to replenish what he's losing
using tech and smarts.
Yeah. But yeah, just to kind of bring it back to what I was talking about initially. I think that it's a genre mechanic that comes up all the time. I think that ganging up and getting benefit for it is something that happens in all sorts of games. Yesterday, we finished up our Easter Hijinks two-parter, and awesome. at the end, we had the Green Lantern hero kind of scooping up problems for the bad guy and just shoving them at the bad guy to solve both the problem that they were dealing with and hurt the bad guy. We had Captain Kronos. He was wrestling with the thing, and then Alice's character Vlad came in just to decimate, and it was all three characters working together on that one guy. And it definitely, I think that, the scene that I was playing out in my head is it was, this pretty cool movie scene to watch all these things going on at one time. My top 3 superhero role-playing games are probably going to be Champions, Mutants, Masterminds, and Supers. Each of them gives me a nice level of granularity, and I see it happen in all different ones. And I can never end up staying with one versus the other because they each approach it in a different fashion. What I love about Supers is what Walt just said, is that Reed Richards isn't going to be able to beat up the Hulk. He should just not have stats that through. A lot of the way people build Champions characters is that everybody is going to build an attack that'll get through. Where in Supers, it starts relying more on that player creativity, on how am I going to use who I am, what I made to get through. How am I going to be able to deal with Superman without just saying, oh, look, kryptonite? And I think that's a great thing. So thanks for the thoughts, and let's move on to the next.
Sure.
Alice, you're up.
Okay, well, for my pick of the week, I want to send out an apology for everyone that we had to postpone today's Session 0 Character Gen for the upcoming Super Shorts. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing 1.5 to 2 hour, because we have some time restraints for some players, little superhero game for Super's Red System. The setting that we're going to be doing is going to be a setting of my creation. It is a setting that I've had on the back burner for probably 7 or 8 years. I have done a little work here and there with it because of writing projects, but never actually pulled it together. So we'll see how it goes. A few things about the world is that the primer that I provided the players basically covers some major events that occurred in the past 3 or 4 years. There's a long history of superheroes in the world. For the United States, there are 3, or have been 3 major superhero groups superhero teams that have had a lot of have a long history. And so one is the Bay Brigade. They are located in San Francisco. The next one is Vigilance of V period, I period, etc. They are named after the founding members' initials of the team, and they're based out of Chicago. Then we have Millennium Sentinels, which are based out of New York. That name is actually a nod to 2 different a game that I played once, and something else. But anyways, in the reason why the PCs would be special in this world and unique and PCs rather than just another superhero is that something has come to destroy or damage all 3 of these teams in the last 4 years. In 2016, July 4th, the United Nations was mass bombed, during which Millennium Sentinels had members of their team acting as security force for the nation's meeting. Many of them were killed. The remainder of the Millennium Sentinels were first responders who found themselves injured because they fought supervillains, they dealt with secondary bombs, etc. So the team was very much damaged. What they have left is limping through. Vigilance, during the chaos that ensued shortly after, hold on, let me just double check my notes. Sorry, I'll go back to the Vigilance in a moment. But the Bay Brigade is under scandal because one of the members is accused of being one of the people who bombed the United Nations, working on behalf of an organization known as Black Sun. Black Sun is a known supervillain organization in my world. They have rumored origins of once being black ops or mercs that worked for government, stuff like that, and split off in one way or another. Something that they're going to be dealing with within the last year is there is a new superhuman drug called Gene I. Gene I is something that was developed, something that nobody knows the exact origins of, but what they do know is that it is used to trigger uh, it is used to trigger a gene that someone named Dr. Ivan Ishkar found in the 1980s. It is basically essentially what in most settings would be the mutant gene. In my world, it's called LHES, latent hyperevolution syndrome. And a lot of the science community now believes that every superhuman would test positive. It's not true. It is very not true. But and so some superhumans are able to hide when they're being forced to be tested for one reason or another. The Gene Eye problem, when it hit Chicago, it created the new Great Chicago Fire, and Vigilance did not respond. Their team did not respond, and later on it was found that they essentially disappeared. There's no explanation. So PCs coming in, they don't have as big of shadows to follow. They don't have as much to step into, but they do need to basically pick up the pieces of these legacies and of the distrust that has been created and try and forge forward. The United Nations, in as bad of shape as it is, have left the United States in my world, and they have moved their temporary location to The Hague until they figure out where they're going to convene in a long-term scenario. Perhaps the PCs will be able to get them to come back to the US. Who knows? But yeah, that's what I have for centering around the United States, which is where we're going to, during character gen, people are going to tell me what grabs them and whether they want to be a multi-location people group that came together and cover the whole US, or if they want to be centered in New York or Chicago or San Francisco or even LA or a different place. And we'll be discussing all of that. Did either of you two have anything you want to pitch in about this?
Do you have a name for the setting?
Yes, I do. Thanks to some people giving me a little help and ideas. Thank you for the Supers group and the Super World RPG group. I decided to name it Earth Alpha 143 because we are looking at the possibility of doing crossovers with Nick's Apogee titles.
Oh my God, those are so fun.
So, but if you guys have anything you want to say.
I really enjoyed the good mix of 4-color and like organizational stuff. The guy that runs New Millennium Games, Dominique Sumner. Yeah, you know, my brother from another mother, my war buddy when we were over in Iraq. He's excellent at his organization stuff when he builds organizations. And I just feel like you guys might have been separated at birth because the organization stuff that he does is very similar to what you're doing. It has that taste of superhero epicness that you expect from like a government organization or organizations that override and deal with superheroes, but also you get that sense of realism in the acronyms and how the organizations are set up. And I think that as comics and superhero games go forward, you're going to see more of that because unfortunately our government is getting so big, and there's more acronyms that keep getting added to the alphabet soup that we have to deal with every day. So I think to see that reflected in a game is very, very cool.
Cool. Brandon, did you have anything before I respond, or should I respond first?
Go ahead and respond to Walt first.
So, Walt, thank you very much for the compliments. I'm really glad you liked it. There are going to be more organizations for people to discover in the world as they continue. There is actually one that I did not outline in my primer, which is when I was doing this a long time ago and writing my first story in progress for it, it occurred to me that if normal humans have WITSEC, wouldn't there be some sort of WITSEC for superheroes that either retired or went undercover and did stuff with an organization and then burned their superhero identities because secret identities are such a big deal in superhero world. So in my world, there is actually a WITSEC for superhumans.
Please tell me it's got a cool name.
I have it written somewhere. I need to find it. I love the name that I came up with it for like 5 years ago, but I can't find it at the moment. I think I might have data lost it, so I'll have
That
to
is
try.
such a fun idea.
But the as you were, and I need to send you the rework of Ghost Story, but this story about Ghost and Adam. Adam actually went undercover, and that's what she doesn't know, is that he went undercover to try and prove her mother to be innocent. And in going undercover, he burned his previous identity. So that's why when he shows up in a new mask. And that's gonna his WITSEC identity is going to come into play. So. Oh, and Brandon, I think that you're on your laptop mic for some reason and not your headset mic, and that's the issue today.
Oh.
Because your sound quality is nowhere near as good as when you're on your headset mic.
But you look amazing.
Thank you so much. That works so well for the people that are listening in. It says I'm on the gaming headset on the mic. So.
Okay. Well, Brandon, why don't you respond?
Oh, well, what I like is, first of all, I think when you're coming into a superhero game, and I've posted threads about this in other ways to see what some people deal with, but it sucks because you're like, well, the GM's already said that this world has the Justice League over here, and we're just supposed to be some other group of heroes, and you're like, what am I supposed to do when I've got Superman running around? And I mean, you literally in one of the cartoons, and I forget which one it was, but Superman is like fighting in Brazil or rescuing people from a tidal wave in Brazil. And then Supergirl is dealing with this chopper full of people who have Lois Lane as a hostage. And she kind of messes it up. And so all of a sudden, Superman's just back in Metropolis. And it's just like, well, how? Because he heard it. And how are you supposed to really deal with the fact that you've got that level of power and feel that way? The Forgotten Realms, I see people do this all the time. Well, let's just go talk to Elminster, and he'll solve all our problems. And when you have this insanely powered individual, it leads to a certain mentality. And so I think that generally, when you're trying to establish a world that has a history of superheroes for whatever reason, but at the same time, establish the PCs as one of the really important groups, without just saying, "Oh, well, you guys can be, the Justice League with this long history." And Justice League is just being thrown out as a generic term; it does not have to be a DC Universe reference. And so, solving those two problems is something that Alice has come up with a couple interesting solutions at times. I've done similar in my games. I'm currently working on an idea on another way to solve it, and I like the solution here is that unlike in the game that I ran, where there was one cataclysmic event, and there were secrets involved with it, but it's something that you knew what happened to them on one level. Here, you have one group that's disappeared, another group that they were greatly injured during an attack, and then other members have just dropped off the radar shortly thereafter. And, another group that's kind of been ripped apart by the political agendas due to their involvement or theoretical involvement in something. And so you're dealing in a world of shadows right there. And Walt, before the broadcast, said that he liked the Tom Clancy meets For Color aspect of it. And I agree. We were joking around on the characters concepts that I've got, and some of them are directly out of the brief that Alice was just talking about, that drug that she's talking about, the Gene I. Somebody who has gotten their powers from Gene I, or looking at it more on the street level is, like Walt was just talking about, an Archer character or something similar that has seen the damage that the drug does, and is, willing to step up in a world of superheroes where they don't have that power, but are going to fight against it, and, much more the street level. Another character concept I've got involves the UN bombing and as you know, all these people are dying in the UN, the spirit energy suddenly kind of rushes into them and gives them a bit of a break from reality. And they spend a couple of years in therapy trying to address the fact that now all of a sudden they hear, you know, all the voices of those that died in that attack, and like Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost, when she can start actually talking to the dead, gets that. The last concept that I just want to talk about today that this kind of brought me to is thanks to a combination of my two other people here. Alice gave the setting, and Walt brings our favorite other host to the show, and that would be Balder. Balder, our favorite, doggy interference. We haven't seen. Oh, there's Balder. Oh, he's waiting for a belly rub, and
Hi, Balder.
and just like a Belgian Malinois police dog that is basically in an Ace Chemicals factory kind of incident involving Gene I instead of the Ace Chemicals factory, is suddenly given superpowers and now is super dog. And I think that that's a character that you can play. It's got elements of silliness, it's got elements of seriousness to it, and I think that can be great. And I think that Supers is a good game to kind of bring that to. So those were my thoughts, not only about the game setting, but the characters that I was thinking about.
Awesome, thank you. I gotta say, I'm really looking forward to GMing and seeing where this goes. So I hope that everyone will be here next week. And moving on, why don't you do your pick of the week, Walt?
Yeah, I'm gonna. I got one book and book series and one comic. Recently, we had Scott Moon on the show, and myself, Dominique Sumner, and a couple of other guys. We have a very, very silly love for mechs and like mech style action. Probably from because of the time period we grew up. A lot of that stuff was on TV. You had this show called Force 5. Which was a bunch of different anime stuff in a TV show, like half-hour TV show. Excuse me. It was, but Scott has this series of books in his Shortyverse, and it's about a mech pilot who is driving one of the smaller mechs on the battlefield on this like war-torn planet. And he just talks an epic boatload of shit to everybody. The narration and his voice, him arguing with the combat artificial intelligence on board, which gets even funnier in the second book because the thing gets a personality upgrade and starts learning its personality from him. So they're just talking crap to each other back and forth. It's just funny, and they're short. They're only like 50 pages each, and just a lot of fun. So if you're into mechs and you like stuff like BattleTech, Mech Warrior, stuff like that, this will definitely scratch that itch. It's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend them. If you sign up for his newsletter, you get access to an audio page, and the narrator for this for the first two books are amazing. So I highly recommend that. But also I wanted to talk about fan reactions to comics and how sometimes fan reactions can get out of control. Recently there's a comic out right now called The Shadow of Vader. It's causing a big stir online. First of all, Chuck Wendig was supposed to be the writer on it, and he was fired for some of his social media presence by Disney. But the new writer took over and took it in a way that just like set the internet on fire. The storyline is part of the storyline is about a nurse who has an unhealthy infatuation with Vader. And throughout the story, she doesn't get to interact with him, but she's on the fringe and, gets glimpses and what have you. And if you haven't read the comic, pause for the next 30 to 50 seconds. But the big uproar on social media is he, he comes into contact with her at some point and she professes this unhealthy love for him. And in true Vader fashion, he kills her. The downside to this was it set off a tidal wave of, why do we have to kill women in comics? And I agree with a lot of the commentary that has been on the other side of that. It's not that he killed her because she was a woman. He killed her because he was Vader. The first time we meet Vader, he kills somebody just for, even though the prisoner he kills is cooperating with him, he still kills the man. And he goes on killing people indiscriminately like an old school samurai. In Japanese feudal culture, which Vader was based on, there was an old thing. It loosely translates to like the rights of life or like the right of nobility, and that right basically said that the samurai had the right to kill anybody below their station. And this is very evident in Vader, who would have used the Force to stare into this person, and he just kills her, not because she was a woman professing her love or anything like that, but because he is dark and twisted and has no value of human life. But a lot of fans have sworn off of Star Wars because of this, and I just find it strange that you're not getting that sense of, but you're dealing with Darth Vader. This dude is unhinged. Why would this bother you when throughout his depiction he's killed women, children, men indiscriminately, and there's never been a "oh my god, this is horrible" moment. But yet, somebody says, "Oh, I love you, and I'll profess to you, I'll take care of you forever, no matter what you look like. You're perfect." And then he slaughters her, not because she professed his love, but once again because he's Vader. It just seems strange to me that this would cause a backlash. What do you guys think of something like that?
So, for me, I have a long history of stuff that I would respond to with this. I'm going to go back quite a few years. When I started playing pen and paper role-playing games, that was over 20 years ago, I would go to conventions with Brandon and my gaming group, which were all guys, and we did RPGA. We, in fact, were so involved in the RPGA, our crew became coordinators at local cons, and we created game days at game stores and such like that, mini conventions. In those conventions, I usually would find that in a room full of 200 men, there would be myself, Rhonda, and Katie on good days. Then as
Vastly
things
outnumbered.
and as days went on, as years went on, it became just me and Rhonda. Katie moved away, and then as time went on further, it became, there were some conventions where I was all alone, some conventions where Rhonda was around. So I was vastly outnumbered. Fast forward a little, and so certainly I have felt the brunt of "you're not wanted here." And I had a big group of guys who said "she's wanted here." So moving on, though, a lot of women have gone through, moving on, like I would say 10 years later, a lot of women started getting into gaming and would complain about the fact that men were like, gave the vibe of "you're not wanted here." And these women want to trade war stories. Great, that's fine. But then I started finding online clubs and, well, meetup groups for face-to-face groups that were women only. I actually went and in the local area that I was living in at the time, I found a meetup group for female gamers. I was like, cool, I would love to actually meet some female geeks and gamers. Well, I applied, and I asked, hey, can I bring my gaming group, my husband, and a few guys in my gaming group? I was responded to by one of the moderators and said, no men allowed, period. My personal opinion of that is, if you want to be included, you need to include people yourself. Exclusion only breeds exclusion. Inclusion breeds inclusion. The divisiveness of our current political climate is a good demonstration of that. Inclusion improves things, where exclusion only makes more people excluded. So I turned them down. I immediately received one or two hate mails from members, from their coordinators, telling me that I should be ashamed to call myself a woman, and I should learn what it means to be a woman, and that I should stand up for women's rights. And they went off to swear at me and went pretty off the rails with me. So I think that the reason why this to me ties in is because I think that the way that our society works in a very divisive world these days is that as soon as the same thing that happens to it, like you said, Darth Vader has had a long history of massacre. But as soon as it's brought into a one-on-one spotlight and there is the option for man versus woman, immediately becomes an issue. There's a TV show years ago, The Unit, that started meeting with fan issues because the women weren't on the SEAL team and weren't in special ops, and they started getting into trouble with feminist rights groups and ratings, etc. So in their last season, they added a woman to their SEAL team and said, well, these are the troubles you're going to come into as a woman, but we're going to allow one woman into the organization when we've never done that before. And it destroyed the show. But because the way that it became unacceptable for this to be the way it is, and because people need to breed this level of exclusion into their minds in order to think that that somehow means inclusion. Because that show did have a lot of very strong women, and they were very included in the things that were going on. They just weren't going out and shooting people. But that wasn't good enough because it was to people, well, we need to exclude in order to include. That's my opinion of what you said, because I completely agree. Darth Vader kills.
I love the exclusion breeds exclusion and inclusion breeds inclusion. That's fantastic. I mean, if we had more of that, a lot of the aggressiveness that we see, people yelling and stuff like that, wouldn't go on, because we'd just be playing games and that would be more fun. Brandon, what did you think?
Well, just, inclusion breeds inclusion. I agree. Darth Vader kills everybody. He is an inclusive fellow. He is like a superhero right now because he's willing to kill everybody. On a more serious note on it, that opening scene. I mean, first of all, you first catch Darth Vader as he's coming out. George Lucas, obviously, at the height of his storytelling power, is going with deep themes that are buried in our collective unconscious, and that you've got these skull-faced stormtroopers coming out, and then to just go off that, now somebody all in black comes out, and it's a great scene as he's coming out after they cut down the door and such. But then he's just got this guy. This is, if I remember correctly, the only time you see him manhandle somebody in the original trilogy, which is basically the only Star Wars movies there are, other than the Ewok movies. I accept the 2 Ewok movies that were on television. Those are brilliant. But he's just kind of like, he's not exerting himself at all. He's just kind of got this guy up in the air, and it's just this casualness that he breaks the guy's neck, even though he's cooperating with him, because he's just like, this is bullcrap, and I'm done with you. You've given me everything. I have supped of your life essence, and now there will be no more of you. And, then he just looks at his guys and tells them what to do. And that kind of casual death, that kind of disrespect for life. You say, what is the dark side? Well, we don't really find out until later on in the movie, but you don't need to find out, because you just saw what the dark side is. When the stormtroopers are rushing through shooting rebels, they're fighting for their lives, just like the rebels are. We're shooting each other. That's war. There's not a good side. There's not a bad side in that exact moment. There's just, I'm going to survive, and that means that you can't right now. But Vader's not threatened in any way, and he's just snuffs the guy's life out. We see that throughout, Darth Vader in reactions. And as to, why do we always have to kill women in comics? I'm going to agree. There have been some terrible things that have been done to female characters, and that they were tied to that. This happens in role-playing games as well. I forget the specific origin of it, but the girlfriend in the fridge story, and that came out of some comic book, I believe, and that you see DMs do this to female NPCs and female PCs, and then you say, well, would they have done that to a male? Would Darth Vader have done this to a male? Let's recast that comic book, and let's have a male nurse have this unhealthy obsession. Would Vader have killed them too? Probably.
The original writer, Chuck Wendig, like I said, he's because of his social media presence, Disney considered him divisive, so they cut him from the projects they had with him. But he said that before he was taken off of the book, the original character in the story was not going to be a female nurse. It was going to be a male mortician. And he said the outcome would have been the same. So it looks like they would have done it to either gender, but
yeah, and I like that initial story. Like, I haven't read this comic, but I'm interested in going and seeing if they've got it up on my Marvel Unlimited subscription to go read through it. But the mortician, I think, actually this really interesting, because it's this, is Vader alive? Is Vader dead? Since he's this, creature of, cybernetics and man that's being barely held together by his hatred of the universe and his hatred of himself. And the fact that you'd have that person who is dealing with death that falls in love with him. I mean, it's very the classic Thanos and death story that you've got going on there. As to the one thing that you mentioned at the beginning on fans' overreaction, we have all sorts of writers who have gotten death threats from their fans. Donny Cates on Venom, King from Heroes in Crisis, Dan Slott from, I believe that was Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah.
And let's take a moment and breathe, guys. This is something we're doing for fun. This is something they're doing because they're passionate about. And in the end, every story that any of us can imagine for these characters is going to get told. We're not going to like them all, but that's still going to be that there's going to be a reset at some point. Some people are going to find it sad. Other people are going to find that acceptable. Jean Grey's going to come back from death. Spider-Man will get back with Mary Jane. Everything's gonna go full circle sooner or later.
I'd like to actually add to that last statement about taking a beat. There are comic books that I love and I will read, and there are TV shows I love and watch. And if you really don't like the way the direction is going, don't read it, don't watch it, but realize a quick little PSA here that writers are people too. So are actors, so are people who put themselves out there to try and either entertain or improve the world. There is a fitness guy that was on YouTube that was providing free videos to people who wanted to get in shape. And I would watch his stuff and see what I could adapt with my limited mobility and my medical problems. But after a while, he actually attempted suicide because he started getting people who, some trolls and critics started getting started posting a little much trolling, and he nearly committed suicide and removed himself from YouTube. Going to Star Wars, we have the fact that there were certain actors and actresses that were attacked really brutally by the fans and one of them attempted suicide and ended up in a mental institution for a time. And then fellow actors and actresses stood up for that actress and said, hey guys, we're people too. Writers are people too. Realize, I understand that the internet allows for anonymity, and the fact that we have become more detached as a society and is not a good thing. I try and use internet to connect, but those negative comments aren't just negative to that one person. You're sending out a negative energy into the world, and these death threats to these artists and writers, they do hurt. And it does. And how long before that writer quits, even though they put out some amazing things most of the time, and they made one decision you didn't agree with, and you decided to send a death threat? How much are you going to miss out on in the next 10 years because of your stupid decision?
And I loved, I actually loved Dan Slott's run on Spider-Man when he was doing Doc Ock in Peter Parker's body. I mean, that was a lot of fun. But when you were following him on social media, he was posting a lot of these threats that he was getting, and it kind of, I mean, I get that this is your out and this is your favorite thing, but you're talking about a character that's been around for how many years now? Same thing when Bendis killed him off in Ultimates, and went with Miles Morales. I mean, it was a tough pill to swallow, but at the same time, I mean, it was fun because it also produced such a character that is well loved by fans and brought a lot of new fans into comics. So it's very tragic when you see this level of animosity coming through something that we should all be enjoying and celebrating versus seeing this level of like hate, which is really tough. But to bring it back to the lighter side, next week we will be going into character generation for Alice's story, which I'm very much looking forward to. And I was thinking earlier, the Gene Eye drug, I could totally picture like guys on the street going, I speak a few languages, as does I know Alice does. And Brandon, do you speak a couple of different languages?
Yo hablo un poquito
Oh,
español.
todo bien aquí. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. As somebody who speaks languages and likes to see how languages go through, I love when something either gets lazy or and changes when it meets a new environment. I could totally see Gene Eye and people who take it being called genies. That would be really neat to see. So it's an evolution of something like that. But I'm definitely looking forward to the game coming up and looking forward to character gen. I just want to see, because Nick hasn't played very many RPGs. He just pretty much has done our sessions and maybe like one other somewhere. So I'm kind of interested to see what kind of character he comes up with.
Ooh, pressure.
Well, I always, some of the most interesting characters I've ever seen are from people who it's their first time making a character, because they've got no idea. They don't know the normal path that people are following or something in a game, and they'll come up with some great concepts.
Yeah, I'm super stoked. So parting thoughts. We'll start with reverse alphabetical order, reverse height this time. Alice, go for it.
Final thoughts. Hey guys, plugging in and come in and join us on our Discords, discord.me/Bamf podcast, and the Sister Supers Discord at discord.me/SupersRed.
Brandon?
We just talked about the death threats and all. How can somebody be upset that a character is killed in the Ultimates universe? I thought that was the entire point of that universe, was make characters that people care about and then whack them in new and interesting ways and then leave them dead. I mean, a great talk. Thanks for having us, Walt.
Absolutely. And just from the way you said whack them we have to do like a one shot of like super powered gangsters. Just so I can hear you say whack over and over again.
Hey, Big Tony, just go out and whack them in the back.
We had a halfling mafia group that was an RPGA. Our gaming group all did. Our gaming group got together and like we had like more than one table worth of people. So we had like 9 people that got together, and we were a hobbit mafia or halfling mafia family. And so even when we were away from each other in different people's pug tables, it was hilarious. And so we had like we had the accountant, we had the
accountant was a gnome.
Yeah, the accountant was a gnome.
We had Cousin Nunzio, our lawyer. I was Guido, the enforcer. I forget some of the other ones.
So we did the whole thing many years ago.
And the accountant was inspired by Dustin Hoffman and Dick Tracy as Mumbles. And so he was Numbers, is what we would call him. And
and you could never understand anything said.
Same kind of talk.
It's freaking brilliant. I love it. Oh my God. Well, before we get into more trouble, this has been our pick of the week for the Bamf podcast. Thank you again, Alice and Brandon, for coming out. It's always a pleasure. And on behalf of Mike Lafferty, who slipped on a banana peel and fell into an alternate universe, this has been Walt, and Bamf, we're out.